Hello and welcome to Frost Over the World. Lots of hot issues again this week. Later in the programme I'll be discussing science and religion, rap music and racism, abortion and Catholicism. But first, Israel. The government of Ehud Olmert looks increasingly shaky following a critical report commissioned by the government itself into last year's war in Lebanon. Mr. Olmert's own foreign minister, Tzipi Livni, called for him to quit, but is still in the government. One opinion poll put Mr. Olmert's approval rating at a somewhat disappointing 0%. And I'm joined right now by the chairman of the Commonwealth Jewish Council, Lord Greville Janner. Greville, good to see you.
Thank you very much.
How would you today summarise Ehud Olmert's position and powers of survival? How would you rate his position today?
Very difficult indeed. I should declare an interest. He is a friend of mine, and so are most of Israel's leaders. So I don't take political positions there, but clearly he's got an enormous problem. But they have a different system to ours. They have proportional representation. They have brought together a party which hasn't got a normal constitution and doesn't decide when the leader has to go. So there's no knowing when he will go, and at the moment he said he's not going to.
And can he hold on?
My guess is at the moment he can and will hold on, but eventually they will have to have an election and decide.
And some people who support Olmert have been calling the foreign minister, calling her a coward for not following through on her criticism by actually resigning on principle.
Well, Tzipi Livni is another friend of mine. She's a character. And yes, it is very odd. It certainly couldn't happen in Britain that you criticise your leader and stay on, but it certainly could happen and is happening in Israel. And they say, well, okay, if that's what you think, fine, but are you going to stay on? She said, yes, I'll work with you while you're there. And that's their system. They are a democracy. They are the only democracy in that entire area, but they're not a democracy which is elected as it is, for example, in Britain, and they're not a democracy where things happen in the same way as they would here. And at the moment he's continuing, and under their constitution he is able to do so until he gets chucked out.
Do you think that, in fact, the attack on the Lebanon was a mistake conceptually as well as in its execution?
Well, it wasn't a mistake from their point of view, as they see it, to try to get rid of Hezbollah, of which they have been immensely concerned because of its growth and its power and the possibility that it could attack them. So when the war started, most Israelis were in favor, but it was obviously extremely badly carried out, extremely poorly organized, and everybody's been talking about it. But there's an amazing statement this week from a Hezbollah leader who dealt with the committee, the Winograd Committee, which has brought out the report which is making life so difficult for Ehud Olmert and his team. And he contrasted this committee, he said, contrast it to Arab states that do not probe, do not ask, do not form inquiry commissions, as if nothing had happened. Well, the extraordinary thing to me is that the committee, which there's all the argument about this week, the Winograd Committee, headed by a High Court judge there, was set up by Olmert himself. He, the Prime Minister who had led the war and opened it, he, the man who has been criticised, he set up this committee.
We will hear more when the full report comes out, won't we? Because
yes, the report's due out in, I think the end of July, and they will say more, but the guts of it are there. It has attacked the government that set it up, and that won't happen in many countries, certainly not in that area where you set up a report and it publicly attacks you.
Well, we'll have to see what the next move is. Thank you very much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure.
Greville Janner there with the view from Israel. In a surprise move this week, the Constitutional Court of Turkey has ruled that a parliamentary vote proposing the Foreign Minister, Abdullah Gül, for the country's new president was illegal. the country's Prime Minister responded that the court had fired a bullet into democracy and has asked for new elections in July. So what will happen next? And how will the country's court and army react if, as expected, the ruling AK party win those elections and again endorse Mr. Gül for president? How can we find out? Well, we're joined now by the Turkish analyst Wolf Piccoli. Wolf, starting right there, there are now going to be elections.
Yes, we know now that we're going to have early general election on the 22nd of July. That was decided yesterday by the Turkish parliament. The question is what will happen between now and then, and also the other bigger question is what will happen after the general election.
Start with the first one.
Sure.
What will happen between now and this? Do you think there'll be more violence, or do you think things are just quietening down a bit?
Well, we haven't seen violence in Turkey. We have seen the military making a very strong statement, certainly the strongest statement for the past 10 years against the civilian government. And we have seen 1 million people demonstrating in Istanbul. The demonstration was very peaceful. And what was important there to see that the demonstrators were saying no Sharia, but no military coup. So there is no appetite in Turkey for any kind of violence or certainly no military coup. The government is now trying to regain the initiative after the blow, after the failing to elect Mr. Gül as president, and now is proposing, is trying to push forward in Parliament a constitutional amendment that would allow basically the people to elect the president, whereas now, with the current system, the president is elected by Parliament. And this can be potentially now as a source of controversy between the government and the opposition.
And people talk about the Islamist AK party and so on. But they say that we're not that Islamic, in fact, and other people say they've done virtually nothing that would bring in more of an Islamic culture in the time, and so they're not Islamic or Islamist. What's the truth about that?
Well, that is a certainly hot debate in Turkey, and it obviously depends who you will ask about that. Yeah. If you ask some of the people demonstrating on Sunday, they will say they are certainly Islamist. If you ask any AKP supporter, they will disagree with that. Well, what is clear that in terms of the record of AKP in power since November 2002, what we have seen, we don't have seen AKP kind of putting forward laws that could undermine the secular regime in Turkey. They have at times made mistakes, like when in September 2004 the Prime Minister came out with the idea of proposing a bill that would kind of criminalize the issue of adultery. There was a huge row in Turkey, and immediately they shoved it. And on the other way around, what is important to note that in the past 4 years and a half, we have seen Turkish democracy kind of improving considerably because of the reforms passed by this government, and certainly thanks to the pressure created by the European Union.
Right. So that we hope for relatively peace up until the elections in July, and then what will happen after that?
We're going to see, first of all, a very long and acrimonious electoral campaign before the election. After that, well, it depends very much who's going to win the election. The expectation is that AKP will do well, possibly better than in November 2002, by playing the card of being the victim party here, the party that was whose candidate failed to get elected because of the intervention by the military, by this memo that was issued last Friday, and by the Constitutional Court biased ruling. That is the line of AKP. After that, I believe that AKP has internalized the lesson. They learned the lesson, and they realized that there are certain boundaries, certain kind of sensitivities in Turkey that could spark a further crisis. Therefore, I don't see them putting forward again the candidacy of Mr. Gül, and I believe they will opt for a compromise candidate that can meet the expectation and demands of the secular establishment.
And what about the situation with the army? We've been mentioning them quite a lot here. Are they as powerful as the army is in Pakistan or somewhere like that, always poised to take power?
Well, the Turkish army is certainly powerful, and is always the most respected institution in Turkey by the Turkish citizen, well above, for example, the Turkish parliament and government. On the other way around, it's clear there are certain limits, and comparing the Turkish experience with the Pakistani experience is a wrong comparison. The Turkish military, for example, the last military coup was carried out in 1980. What they've been doing in 1997 and last Friday is issuing a memo. What was interesting, specific about last Friday, that the memo was posted on the website of the Turkish Chief of General Staff, and some people are now labeling it as a first coup, the first military coup done via the internet.
I see. All of this chaos going on, does it affect Turkey's campaign to join the EU. I guess that was going badly enough anyway.
Certainly, the Turkey bid for membership has been kind of in troubled waters for some time, and the recent events, they're not going to help. What was interesting there to see that we have seen a very sharp reaction by the European Union last Saturday after the military memo was issued, basically hinting to the military that they should just stay out of politics, which in some ways helped the government in Turkey. I don't think that the crisis will kind of create a permanent damage to Turkey bid for membership, but certainly a stain will remain out there, because we know that the decision of the Constitutional Court was taken when the court was under intense pressure because of the military memo and because of civil society in Turkey.
Well, thank you very much, Wolf, for bringing us right up to speed there. We'll watch with interest how it develops.
My pleasure.
From here. So do join us again after the break. We'll be globe-trotting some more from Kenya to Mexico.